and welcome to this edition of Business Supes, where we interview successful business owners, learn a little bit about them, their business, and of course, their business superpower. Today, I am joined by Chris Slaton from Midnight Run Services. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Art, for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. So why don't we kick things off and just have you tell us a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the business. What's your origin story?
So Midnight Run Services now is a security focused or based company. We started out in 2005 as simply as a part-time locksmith, unlocking cars and stuff like that. We added private investigation, process service, and security guard agency in 2010. And this all kind of boils back to my history. I spent a number of years in law enforcement through the 80s and 90s here in Oklahoma. Worked as an investigator the last about 6 years of my career in law enforcement. Left that mainly for financial and opportunity reasons. I think I have an entrepreneurial heart to begin with. I loved law enforcement, but the nature of law enforcement is you're compensated by longevity, not by skill or talent or anything like that, just however long you've been there. And I was working along guys, especially in my division, because I was a young detective that had been there, 10 years doing half the work, making twice the money. And it was a frustrating part of the job, beyond the politics and that sort of thing. So I decided to get out and try to do something on my own. First thing I got into was financial planning. And it turns out that was more insurance sales, and I really didn't like that at all. So I floundered around just for a moment, went to work with my little brother. He's also an entrepreneur, and he's built a mechanical engineering company up. Ultimately, I went to work for him in sales, which I still didn't like, but I learned a great deal. And had the opportunity to do some management, small business management with him, because he actually took a contract job on a design project that probably everybody in the world is aware of now, but he was one of the pioneers on that. So it gave me about 2 years of actually managing his company. So I got some understanding of small business, and some of the stuff that would be scary became not so scary. So the next part of this story tells you where I got the name of the company. My brother and my father were out at a movie one night, and we come out after the movie, and my brother had locked his keys in his car. So we had to call locksmith, and some kid shows up in a pickup and locks it in about 5 seconds. And we paid him $45 back in, 2000. And I thought, I can do that. So I got to looking into it, and I really could. There wasn't anything to it. I had to print a business card saying I was a locksmith, and that was all I needed to do to get locksmith tools back then. Since then, the industry has gone to state licensing and things like that. And there's obviously a lot more to it. But I didn't have enough sense to realize that there was no school for locksmithing. There was no degree or anything like that. So I had to learn it's an apprentice business, and I did it without apprenticing, essentially. So I learned it just by trial and error for the most part. I did partner with some locksmiths here locally, and I would go in and work for them for free on Saturdays to learn the skills, learn the industry. And that was how it got started. And I still managed the engineering design house for probably another 6 or 7 months before I was making enough money. I didn't overcome the money I was making, but I was making enough I could survive on to try to build this.
Right.
But because I was moonlighting with the engineer company, I called the company Midnight Run. At that point, I had some disastrously long name that started with my name, because back then 100% of our marketing was in the yellow pages. So alphabetical was important. So, it could have been AAA Midnight Run or something like that. But that's how that started. And I got a van and started accumulating tools, started working for these other locksmiths, both locally and some nationally. I would take national calls on some things, and just learn the business. I had a couple of really good clients that kept me kind of fed while I was learning all this, some real basic stuff. That was during the Fannie Mae bust and all the foreclosures. And I had a client that I probably did 10 foreclosure residential rekeys a week, just whenever I could get to them. And that helped stabilize the income on that. So in in about 2010, I was approached by some of the current detectives at the police department that I'd worked at. And they were like, hey, we're doing some, off the books type after hours private stuff, and we've got more than we can handle. And why don't you, go get your license and help us out with that? So I did. So it was sort of a step back into the law enforcement world, but I realized real quickly that private investigation is much different than law enforcement criminal investigation. It's a mightily different animal. The skill set's very similar, but the tools are all different. I enjoyed that a lot, and that got me into the kind of the full security umbrella that I've got now, which the locksmith and the private investigation process service goes hand in hand with private investigation. So we do a lot of civil process paper handling. Matter of fact, that's probably the most consistent vertical I have in this business is the process service. It's got a decent margin, not a great one, but a decent one. But I can count on it every year being, a little bit of an increase every year. The security guard agency was something I never did really want to get into, but about 2013, I got the opportunity to work for a gentleman I was doing process service work for him, and it turned out he's like, hey, I've got a situation, can you get me a security guard out here this evening? I'm like, sure, I can take care of that. And by the next morning, I had 7 locations with 24/7 security needed. I had to hire 45 guards in 30 days.
Wow.
That was a baptism in fire, and it was challenging, but it was exciting. I didn't have the infrastructure as a small business. I knew I really at that point I had me and one gal that did my bookkeeping, what I call my director of operations now, that helped me kind of organize some of that stuff. We ended up with like 40, 45 security guards, armed security guards. So I had to bump up insurance. I had to bump up payroll and all that kind of stuff. And I really didn't have a ton of money in the bank. So we were hand to mouth. I mean, I had to get my check from my client every Friday so I could pay on Monday. It was a ride for a while. We managed that for about 10 years. This last year, the cost of insurance increased. It's really been hard to find the guards with the skill level maybe, or the temperament for what I was looking for. And the contracts, the clients weren't willing to pay what was going to be required to keep up with that. So I could have probably managed it by doubling or tripling my contract hours, but I chose not to. I chose to just go ahead and not really dissolve it, but dissolve the contracts I had going. So we're no longer doing the security guard. Also found that because of the high overhead for the security guard agency, I could add one more locksmith truck and overcome that margin, that profit pretty easily. So now kind of goes into the next hurdle of hiring. Everything I do under the umbrella of my company, locksmith, private investigation, process service, and security guard agency, all 4 of those require a state license. So I can't just hire everybody off the street. I either have to hire somebody that's not licensed and lead them through the licensing and training process, or I have to get somebody with experience. Both of those are expensive right up front. And locksmith is something that there's no school for. You have to either have been doing it several years, or it takes several years to apprentice you up, train you up to where you're a money making entity in the company, not a money draw. So hiring in this company is very difficult. And that would be the biggest struggle, the biggest obstacle I have is hiring productive people. So what I have to do is I have to hire good people with basic skill sets, not in my industry. Like for a locksmith, I always say you need to be mechanically inclined. You need to know how to take something apart and put it back together and understand the relationship between the parts and make it work. And you need to like to do puzzles, because there's no standardization in our industry. So if you get into a particular lock or doorknob or, piece of equipment, you have to figure out why it's not working. There's no book. There's no rule book. So you have to have those tube straights, and then you need to be super good with people, good customer service, be able to listen and really understand what the customer's asking, because they don't know what they're talking about in our lingo. So
Right.
you have to be able to translate that. And so if I get somebody with that skill set, I can make you a locksmith. But if you don't have that, I can't make you an employee anywhere in my
Hmm.
company, really. So that's the challenge, is find somebody with all of that that also has a desire to be part of a team.
Hmm.
Uh, One of the real concerns in my industry is, if I spend 2 to 4 years training you up with this skill set and these licenses and all that, it's all you have to do is walk out the door and buy a van and a few pieces of equipment, and you are now my competitor. And
Right.
that's really hard. So I have to figure out a way to train them up, make them successful, and keep them with without making them my competitor, because they don't go work for my competitor, they become my competitor. And
Right.
that's one more name in that list of names in Google that I have to fight with. So I think that kind of goes through how the business got started and kind of the steps. It's convoluted, but it's been a lot of fun, and it's been very interesting.
So what's your favorite part about being a business owner?
Oh, flexibility, probably. I mean, the work is hard, it's challenging, it's stressful, as far as being an entrepreneur, but the flexibility, the opportunity to do things outside of a 9 to 5. I did, even in law enforcement, where I did so many different things in a day. It still felt like I clocked in and I clocked out. And
Hmm.
and as an entrepreneur, one, you never clock in, clock out. You're sort of always on the clock.
Right.
But you also have the flexibility to go. I take a lot more vacations than I ever did in anything else. I do a couple of cruises a year. I do some things with my family that I probably couldn't have done if I had to, schedule out my 2 weeks a year vacation working for some
Right.
company. So I would say that's the best part of being an entrepreneur, being self-employed. That sounds really great, but it's offset heavily by the stress and the
Hmm.
employees and that sort of thing.
It's funny because I ask that question almost every time I do one of these, and it always comes back to freedom somehow, either
Yeah.
financial freedom or time freedom or freedom to choose, who I put on the team, it really is just an interesting concept that ties, I think, to that entrepreneurial spirit. So I may already know the answer to this, but what would you say is the most frustrating or challenging part of being an entrepreneur?
So as an entrepreneur, as a single person entrepreneur, I didn't buy a company and have a board. So it's just me trying to
Right.
trying to build this company. There's the imagery or whatever that people use to describe entrepreneurship, and most of it is you have a large boulder that you're trying to push up the mountain, and your goal is to get it over the crest. But you have to be tough enough to let that boulder roll over you several times while you're trying to push it up that mountain. And that is entrepreneurship. We have knocked at the door at $1 million a year revenue, and then we've been to less than $250,000 in revenue, and we
Mhm.
bounce back and forth sometimes depending on what's going on. When I had 30 or 40 security guards working, 7 or 8, 10 different contracts, I wasn't too far from that. But
Mhm.
I take that away while I'm building up the locksmith, I'm way down on the bottom again. And so you're always pushing that boulder, and you're always looking for solidify maybe or make your cash flow more solid so that it's
Mhm.
not scary. if that if
Yep.
that makes sense.
No, it
So
makes
that's
perfect
it.
sense.
Yeah, those are the tough things, is that. And I knew from my experience with insurance or financial planning, and with the engineering company trying to sell design software,
Mhm.
i'm I'm not a very good salesperson. I lack the ability to close maybe the sale. I love talking to people, and I can talk about your business for hours, but somehow trying to convince you that my product is going to benefit your business and close that sale.
Mhm.
I wasn't very good at that. Well, that shows up in my business. I'm not great at sales, so I really have to rely on marketing more than I do sales to
Okay.
get things going. And it's good. It's just not as hands on. I'm at the mercy of whatever Google or
Right.
thing that's out there, the yellow pages, and I just have to learn how to work with that because I know that's the way it's going to end up because I hate it.
And it's interesting because I think we're all in sales, and I don't know that we always realize that, right? But every day we're selling, right? And I think we start as children. We're natural salespeople. We're constantly closing our parents. Can I have this? Can I get candy? Can I go play outside? And then I think as parents, we beat that natural salesperson out of our children, and then we go out into the workforce. It's like, okay, you're expected to be a salesperson again. It's like, well, wait a minute. It just doesn't seem fair. All right. So the question that started it all, what is your business superpower?
I feel like the thing that has kept me in business, and in some cases made our business successful, is I think the ability to network, or at least communicate with other people in a way that I guess I recognize early on that I don't care if you're the president or the janitor, I'm likely to learn something from you in a conversation,
Hmm.
whatever. So the ability to work with locksmiths on Saturdays for free, building that relationship. Not only am I working for them for free on Saturday, they know what I'm doing. They know I have a company, right?
Right.
So 6 months down the road, when I'm out, underneath the steering column of a car, working, trying to figure out how to make a key to this car, I can actually call that locksmith up and say, "Hey, I'm in a mess. I don't know how to fix it. What would you do?" So that ability, I think the large contracts that I have gotten have been because we did a simple job. We rekeyed one
Mm.
house, unlocked a car, something like that. But the ability to communicate right then, right there on site with somebody and build a connection has turned that into a large contract that I have, revenue year after year from. So I
Right.
feel like that really is I can't sell you anything, but I can build a relationship with you that,
Hmm.
that you're going to remember me in this situation. And if there's a way I can help, I'm easy to work with maybe. So I feel like that is definitely by far the superpower. That's what has kept business coming through the door for 20 years nearly.
That's awesome. Yeah. What's the saying? People buy from those they know, like, and trust, right?
Right.
So
Right.
perfect example there. So, all right,
And they
last
share it with
question.
other
So,
people. That's what helps.
yes, that's true. Word of mouth, referrals, and somebody being willing to put their name behind you goes a very, very long way. That's a great point. So, all right. So, what would be your nugget of advice that you would share with other business owners?
Man, and this probably goes against the grain. So if you're an entrepreneur or maybe a serial entrepreneur, that's what I call my brother. He buys and sells his businesses. He doesn't have any passion for the business he buys or
Mhm.
sells. It's maybe he's a passionate for the high of that sale. But anyway, for me, if you're going to be a small business owner, you have to be passionate about something, your business or your product or your clients, something you have to be super passionate about because that's what gets you up in the morning to keep doing the
Mhm.
job. Because there are days, weeks, months that you don't want to get up and do this job.
Right.
So you have to have some passion in there to kind of overcome that. But by having that, then 20 years goes by pretty quickly. I mean, this is my second career, and it still doesn't feel like
Mm.
I've done that. And like I said, the freedom helps you design your days around where you need to be to keep that passion going.
Well, Chris, that's great advice, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to hang out with us and share your business superpower. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate that.